Joe Biden's choice for Secretary of the Department of Education helped oversee turning classrooms into sites of critical race theory. Public schools are about to become more left-wing and anti-white and much less interested in educating your kids. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start by discussing the social justice warrior Joe Biden has selected to further destroy American public schools. And I've said this before once last year. We got to do it again. We've got to come up with another word because schools denotes learning, school denotes education, school denotes knowledge and achievement. And American public schools are interested in none of those things. They have become full-blown, what's the word? We got to help me come up with a word, Katie. Got to come up with a word for what they are. They are not schools. They are ashrams. They are bodegas. They are a lot of things. But they have very little to do with school.
You know what? They could be a bodega. Bodega has everything except...
And it's wonderfully Spanish.
That's true. And you could have a good meal there. AOC likes to go to her local bodega. If you haven't seen me talk about that before, you sure can. But let's get into the specifics so we can talk about our friend Miguel Is it Cardona?
Mm-hmm. Like the brain tumor.
There you go. Miguel Cardona is the choice, supposedly, of Joe Biden, but whoever's actually operating Joe Biden has chosen for Secretary of Education, supposedly Miguel Cardona. And currently, Mr. Cardona is the Connecticut Commissioner of Education. Oh, Connecticut. One of those states that had so much potential back in the day and has just...
Well, and obviously a very Hispanic state.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, a lot of Hispanics
in the upper echelon of the Connecticut. Well, he has helped oversee the curricula for high school students to be implemented in the fall of 2022, and it's, of course, influenced by critical race theory. What else would it be influenced by but that? And it's according to what the curricula says, that the Connecticut high schools will now be required to offer a course in African American, Black, Latino, and Puerto Rican studies after that state board of education unanimously approved its implementation. So, of course, Mr. Cardona would be overseeing that and cheering it on. So that's what's going to be coming in at the federal level then.
Right, and they already don't teach really any American history. But, of course, keep in mind, identity politics history is American history. So no longer will they learn about the founding fathers who are all racist and bigots. We're going to spend time in classrooms where kids can't even spell their last names correctly studying Puerto Rican history. This is coming to in Connecticut, of all places.
Connecticut, as I like to say.
And again, what we learned from this, we know from this, Katie, that the study of history is not about history.
No.
It has nothing to do with the achievements of past people. It is a way of punishing these identity studies courses. It's a way of punishing white people for living in a country that has a specific narrative of history and not being progressive enough.
Yes, and as closest to history as they can get is maybe herstory.
That's right.
And Z-story and every other alphabet soup story. Pretty soon story will be considered racist as well. But they are going to offer this course as an elective for right now. But of course it says the board is hoping that with enough momentum, it could expand and be required for all students. Well, if Mr. Cardona is going to be the Secretary of Ed for the whole nation, that momentum will roll right downhill and it'll be in every state.
For the entire country.
Exactly.
And notice what's happening here. You are not just demonizing white history. That's what we're doing now, right? Whenever we teach so-called white history, we talk about the founding fathers, we talk about any significant traditional movement in American history, we demonize white people. We use it as an example to talk about how, Civil War, here's a great, we're covering the Civil War in school today. And I want you to know that Abraham Lincoln should not be given credit for liberating slaves. That didn't happen. And we really got to start tearing his statues down because, he did bad things to Indians. So when we read traditional American history, now it's to demonize white people. Now you're demonizing white people and you're moving to the next phase, which is to erase them entirely.
And specifically under the learning objectives for this curriculum, it does say that you will analyze how race, power, and privilege. And if those aren't the terms we used all of 2020, I don't know what is. How race, power, and privilege influence group access to citizenship, civil rights, and economic power. Yes.
And we heard all for the 4 years of Betsy DeVos of the Department of Education. What a shame it was that Trump appointed a non-educator.
Yeah.
Trump is really a bad guy. He appointed a non-public school person to run the public schools, and it was just a slap in the academic faces. All of these teachers and superintendents and principals were so offended that we had a non-educator in the White House. And who did he do appoint? Somebody who's not terribly interested in education, achievement, actual history, somebody who's playing sociological and political games with your kids. Now he, who's not really a teacher and not really interested in education as we traditionally understand what that means, he's interested in politically remaking your kids in his own image. And that's okay by the public schools.
And in his own words, he says, let's not forget the connection between kids wanting to be in school and kids attending school. And when we see that our attendance rate with Black and Latino students is worse, when we see that our achievement outcomes or academic outcomes are disparate in Connecticut, we have to take real action.
Right. Notice that every kid in this country is required to go to public school if they're not in alternate schools. They're required to go to public school. And you just got through saying when we see Black and Latino kids not in school, you act as if that someone's holding them back. You're pretending, right, that somebody's out there, some white person is out there physically tying these kids to chairs in their houses so they don't get to take advantage of the school. With all due respect, Mr. Cardona, that's the cancer anyway, with respect to you, those kids aren't in school because they don't want to be. And because Black and Latino cultures are too busy pretending that learning and achieving and accomplishing is too much like acting like white kids to make your own kids proud to be students. Maybe if you got a handle on that, instead of giving us every hyphen identity course you possibly can at the expense of real learning, maybe you would have those kids back in school.
And he does, you can tell just in the statements that he's given so far, and look at the ones to come. Everything about him is focused in, not at all on all of the kids, not the white kids, but just the Black and Latino kids, because he says identities matter, especially when 27% of our students identify as Hispanic or Latino, and 13% identify as Black or African American.
And 60% don't. But they don't matter. They have to be taught a lesson that they're on the wrong side of everything. And you're doing this to kids. And so this is the guy who will now be, and again, teachers unions love this guy. Teachers are all excited. We finally have an educator in the Department of Education. They say, now you know from their own mouths what they mean by education, but what they mean by educator is a left-wing social justice ideologue, a purveyor of Marxist socialist dialectic, using your kids as tools to accomplish all sorts of social games, social objectives that have nothing to do with a school, SCHOOL, is about. So we've got to come up to a word. I like bodega since we're going to have Jefe in office now.
There you go.
But there's got to be another word. Help us out there in education land. What's the right word to convey what they are? It's got to have utilitarian waste of time as part of what it means. We got to think about this. We got to come up with a better word than school, because these clearly aren't schools anymore.
So we've talked about Mr. Christopher Ruffo before, and he is a contributing editor at City Journal, and he's been digging into, and will continue to dig in for the next 3 months, he said, what's happening in our schools and how our teachers are being trained to talk about race and social justice and just, all of the buzzwords that we keep hearing. So he took a look at Seattle and how Seattle wants its schools to remain, these social justice training grounds. And so he looked into what Seattle's been doing regarding the district's critical race theory training, aimed, of course, at the white teachers. And he released these documents on Twitter. And as he has stated, he's going to be doing this for many school districts across the country. Look at his Twitter account in the next coming months here. So here's what he said. Scoop. Seattle Public Schools tells teachers that the education system is guilty of spirit murder. What? Spirit murder. Yep, in quote, spirit murder against Black children, and that white teachers must bankrupt their privilege in acknowledgement of their thieved inheritance. This is what the Seattle Public School are telling our teachers. Okay, well, let's just keep on going, because then right away we got to acknowledge how where all of us Americans live is on stolen land. And so in the training that these white teachers were given, they were told immediately, slap them in the face, knowing that the land you live on is stolen, completely stolen We are colonizers of Native American ancestral lands, and the United States was built off the stolen labor of kidnapped and enslaved black people's work, which created the profits that created our nation. That's just the beginning.
It's so myopic. I mean, they're taking what is such a small relative fragment of what our history is, and they're making it stand for the whole. I go back to what I said a moment ago. Do you see, Mom and Dad, what this guy's job is? It's not to have anything. He actually is insisting that in order to make unaccomplished African American and Hispanic kids who should work harder, who should be in school, who should have better support networks from their own communities, he's telling you that their failure is attributable to the white supremacy of your teachers. These teachers are as left-wing as they come anyway, and they're not left-wing enough. What you're being told by these teachers, and you and I both know, these teachers, when they go through education departments at universities, it is a non-stop diet of progressivism that you almost, if you're going to student teach, you better be very well careful if you want a job, that you demonstrate your liberal bona fides. And now those people are being told they are not left-wing enough, and they have to punish themselves. They have to bankrupt themselves. They have to realize that it's a privilege to teach these kids that they don't deserve. Mm-hmm. This is what you're teaching teachers. In what sense are these schools, again, these bodegas of social change?
Well, Mr. Ruffo continued.
And I got to think, when I hear the word bodega, I think of Jerry Seinfeld. Little Jerry Seinfeld and the cockfight. Oh, Jerry Seinfeld. Seinfeld.
I'm not a Seinfeld fan. Come at me. All right, so the teachers being trained in Seattle, I almost said Mark Ruffalo. Silly me. Christopher Ruffo said he released a creative team slide. Ooh. And that taught the teachers that the participants identify themselves by both gender pronouns and their race labels. Okay, while it has become commonplace in academia to use gender pronoun identifiers, this is perhaps the first example of an institution creating the expectation for explicit race labeling in the workplace. So take a look at the specific creative team members. There they have their pictures, and then they have all their pronouns. That has to be in there first. We have to know their pronouns, and then we must know what race they are, because if they are not of a race that we are, then obviously we can't identify or we can't learn from them, and that's important.
And notice the quasi-religious nature of this. Look at for Flor Delerio Correa, she, her, Chicana, interagency gray wolves, my ancestors guide me. I mean, you literally have brought in paganism. Paganism. Do you see any Lutherans or Methodists up there?
I did not see that.
I wonder if you even get away with it. If you were a white person, could you actually put on there that you were a Catholic or something? Look what they've all put under there.
Yeah.
The things that they go by. It is unbelievable. You're reading here. This is as if New Age hippies got in charge of everything. Maybe it's not a
Maybe they
Remember
are.
The show Portlandia?
Oh, I
that
never watched
10
it,
years ago made fun of this stuff without even realizing how completely right they were about it. I think of one of those Portland lesbian bookstores from Portlandia. These are the people now running your kids' public schools.
Have all of the people on Portlandia renounced their sins, or like
their whiteness,
renounce the
whiteness
and talk about their sins of having made that show. Well, the training continued, and the trainers decided to tell the white teachers that they must commit to the journey, because it's a journey of anti-whiteness, even if their lizard brain makes them afraid that they will have to talk about sensitive issues such as race, racism, classism, sexism, or any kind of ism.
How can this possibly be legal under current race Title IX and other titles?
Lizard brain, okay?
To suggest that whites have lizard brains, number one, but that they commit, that as white people, they must commit to a journey of anti-whiteness. I mean, you're asking them to reject their very selves. This would never stand in a court of law if it got that far along. Why are you, teachers of Seattle, putting up with this garbage?
Because they're on the journey.
Oh,
duh.
It's the journey.
They're on their
Don't
journey.
Don't stop believing. That's all the journey I know, baby.
On this journey. That's a good one. You took my fun references.
Any way you want it. That's the way you need it.
Stop. Just stop. Journey was much better than you. Anyway, you must then self-reflect. As Ruffo says, the goal of this program is to transform public schools into activist organizations. At the end of said training, teachers must explain how they will practice this anti-racist pedagogy address current social justice movements taking place, and become anti-racist outside of the classroom.
It's not enough to be an anti-racist in the classroom, which your job depends on.
You
will do it at home, and you will show us how you're doing at home. And we know that anti-racist curriculum is racist. The only way you can satisfy the aims of anti-racist curriculum is to become racist against white culture, white people, and white identity. Anti-racist, ironically, Orwellianly, Sovietly means exactly the opposite of what it says. In order to teach in our schools, you will become racist and bigots against yourselves, or you have no place here. How could this possibly stand in a court of law? I just don't see it.
It doesn't matter, because all you need is to form activist teams, and that's what Seattle's done. They've formed the Seattle's Department of Racial Equity Advancement and the deployment of racial equity teams, Captain Planet. And that's going out in dozens of their schools. And as their stated goal is, advance educational racial equity.
Right. Racial equity is the point of schools. Not education, not learning, not preparing your kid for college. Again, beautiful. Some of these stories are a little older, but hear you now. Now the snowball will roll down the mountain. Now the floodgates are open. Now the horses are out of the barn and they are galloping across your meadows. What you've got now with the incoming Biden administration, and you've got our good friend Miguel Cardona becoming the new superintendent of public schools, all these things that were lingering, all these things that were building up are about to explode. Get ready to have your public school, mom, I don't care where you are, to have your public school completely overrun by this in the next 4 years. There will not be a school in the country where this will not be the norm in 4 years. What are you going to do about it now? This next story is a story we did at the very end of last year, 2020. We want to bring it back in 2021 because literally this is the moment, guys, where you see all of this stuff that the dike is about to break. The floodgates are about to be blasted open. All of this stuff that's been backing up and has been to some small degree, if not put on hold, not stopped, not even really slowed down all that much, but just slightly stifled under the Trump administration, is about to break free. There is nothing standing between the federal government, not at the president's level of the presidency, certainly not at the level of the Department of Education, not the vice president, not the leadership in Congress, not the leadership in Senate. There is no one on the side of the left here who is going to stop this. And most of your Republicans will bury their heads in the sand. Your schools are about to be completely and utterly transformed into sites of radical left-wing social indoctrination. You think it's been happening so far? You think maybe you've skipped the worst of it because your kid is growing up in a suburb of Nebraska? No. This is the plan for the country now. The feds own it. And the feds are about to push it right down your throat, and there is no one to stop it. No one. And what's going on in San Diego public schools would make the mayors of Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago jealous how far left they've gone.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Well, this is just kind of like the Seattle story we just talked about in the last segment because, again, it's Christopher Ruffo. And in addition to being a newspaper editor, he's a visiting fellow for domestic policy studies at the Heritage Foundation. And I can't stress enough how you should follow him on Twitter if you are in the Twitter sphere, because what he's going to be doing over these next couple months, he said, is unleashing and unveiling what's actually happening in these districts across the nation. And he had actually started with San Diego Unified School District and how they also held a white privilege training for their teachers. And he had outlined on Twitter what their training had included. And even though San Diego schools have been shut down, they made sure they had this virtual training because it was so important. So he had tweeted out originally that the training begins with the land acknowledgement. Again, it's this land acknowledgement saying that everyone who lives in America, we're all colonizers, and you live currently on, stolen Native American land. So children feel that white guilt right there immediately. And then they're told that they will experience guilt, anger, apathy, and closed-mindedness because of their white fragility. So the teachers are being taught this, and they're going to then teach the children this.
How utterly creepily Orwellian this is.
Yes.
When anybody objects for any reason, it's not because they have a point. It's not because we should listen to them. It's not because they are entitled to a worldview that's different. It's because they are angry, closed-minded, and fragile. Anyone who does not go along with us is angry, closed-minded, and fragile, and therefore can be legitimately removed from her position because, not because she's different, not because she offers an alternative worldview, not because she has facts and data perhaps to support her argument, but because her fragility disqualifies her. And notice what they've done too, Katie. The first lesson learned by the teachers in both Seattle and California is going to be the first lesson taught to all your kids.
Yes,
there is
absolutely.
no such thing as the United States of America. There is no country named that. What exists as the United States is an unjust, usurped, stolen nation. There is no such thing as America.
Yep.
Every other culture in the world, including native cultures that stole from each other, that happened in California too. One tribe owned this until another tribe took it away. All that stands as part of history. Mm-hmm. We don't argue with that. But America and America alone does not exist as a country, which is why we don't have to teach you American civics and history, because it's not a legitimate country, which is why the Founding Fathers and the Constitution and the founding documents will not be taught to your kids, because we would be teaching your kids the justification for a country that does not actually exist. This is where they are. They are teaching your kids in post-American classrooms.
And that's why instead of being these teachers being trained by historians to better understand and teach the complexities within our own history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to then be able to teach to our children, you get these teachers being trained by activists like Robin DiAngelo and Ibram Kendi, who's told the teachers, you are racist. You are upholding racist ideas, structures, and policies, and you also must commit to becoming anti-racist. That's
must. Notice that verb. Must.
Everything
you have no choice. And by the way, these are conditions of moving forward to work in those districts.
It's like newspeak. All this anti-racist. It's not. You can't just be. Oh, I'm not racist. No, you have to be anti-racist. You have to follow exactly what they want and toe the line. And still, it won't be good enough because you will be made to beg.
You will be made to care.
Made to care and
There's
to beg.
Nothing,
that's what's gonna
nothing
happen.
else you can do. And again, I want to, Mom, you please, on this first show of the new year.
And you're begging.
Get out. It's segment one of the first New Year show. And I'm telling you, get them out. They've already decided America doesn't exist. There's nothing you can say to argue against them. They've already decided that the country is illegitimate. They are operating the schools as if they had run a coup and conquered the United States government itself. They are already doing what the Nazis and the socialists did. They are decapitalizing the students. They are stripping kids of their former Americanness and shaming them for it and teaching them this great new country that will be called anything but America. That's where we're at.
And with that, it's time for some real education. The Odyssey. Ever heard of it? It was written back in the 8th century BC, and it's one of 2 major ancient Greek epic poems attributed to that guy, Homer. Now, as with the Iliad, the poem's divided into 24 books. It follows the Greek hero Odysseus, king of Ithaca, and his journey home after the Trojan War.
And you said half-jokingly, the Odyssey, have you heard of it? Recognizing that everybody has heard of it. Give it 10 years and no one will have heard of it. 10 years from now, an entire generation of kids will have no idea. And so I want to take a moment here and explain to you what's so remarkable about the Odyssey in a very short window of time that we have here. This is a scene where, among his many travels, his war-weary, travel-weary Odysseus, after conquering Troy, had to wander another 10 years before he was allowed home. He's washed up on an island where he's disguised by his goddess patron Athena. He looks older than he is. He looks exhausted. He's been at sea, held prisoner for 7 years on an island. And he washes up here as a stranded man, a shipwreck. And in order to honor this guest, the king of this town puts on Olympic-style games where everybody starts participating in boxing and running and all sorts of things. And at one point, a brash young soldier of this king looks at Odysseus, who looks bedraggled and worn out, and kind of mocks him for not ever having have been an athlete. Right? Now remember, this under the guise of Athena, you don't see what a superhero this guy is, this Odysseus. So here's Odysseus' response to this young man, to Broad Sea. He says, Homer writes, with a dark glance, wily Odysseus shot back, indecent talk, my friend. You are a reckless fool, I see that. So the gods don't hand out all their gifts at once, not build and brains and flowing speech to all. One man may fail to impress us with his looks, but a god can crown his words with beauty, charm, and men look out with delight when he speaks out. Never faltering, filled with winning self-control, he shines forth at assembly grounds, and people gaze at him like a god when he walks through the streets. Another man may look like a deathless one on high, but there's not a bit of grace to crown his words. Just like you, my fine, handsome friend. Not even a god could improve those lovely looks of yours, but the mind inside is worthless. Now, little black kids, little Hispanic kids, little white kids don't need lessons like that. The idea that don't judge a book by its cover, by it's the internal man that matters, that substance is more important than style and form. Those are lessons we shouldn't teach kids anymore because 2,800 years ago, a white man wrote them down. So we're going to ban those books. Shame on you.
All right, before we go, just a reminder, and it should be a New Year's resolution here in 2021, that the best way to keep up with our various shows here at Freedom Project is to follow us on Parler. So take a whole 10 seconds of your day and follow at Duke Pesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. Now, we want to take a moment to show some love here, kick off 2021, to our Patriot Club members. And today, we're going to give a shout out to Bob from Colorado Springs, Colorado, all the way over there in Mountain Land. Thank you, Bob, for supporting us. And if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club, and we're going to send you a life-altering tumbler. True story. Visit patriotclub.us today to get started. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. According to the United Nations, 2021 is the year of peace and trust, along with the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables, and among being all these other year of things that they did. But you know what? Year of Fruits and Vegetables, I can get behind that.
The Year of Fruits and Vegetables? How come California gets its own honor? And that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.